بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وعظيمنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه الغر الميامين. الحمد لله الذي جعلنا من المتمسكين بولاية سيدي ومولاي علي بن أبي طالب. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. أما بعد، يقول الله في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم. The first of our salawat in honor of Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. The second in honor of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. The third with your loudest voices in honor of Imam Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman. Respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Islam and racism is a historical as well as a contemporary topic. Historical in the sense that we are able to examine all the theories related to racism that have affected many a society, all the different standpoints, all the different viewpoints that have developed throughout the ages regarding the coexistence of different races. Contemporary in the sense that racism still affects many communities, both Islamic and non-Islamic. And the idea that unfortunately racist concepts still come forward in many of our opinions and much of the way in which we interact with each other. And therefore there is a need to point a finger at the disease of racism in order to ensure that it does not affect our communities any further, as well at the same time speak out against racism which affects communities throughout the world. Because we know very well that our Holy Prophet did not envisage for a community that would have racist undertones wherever it may be in the world. And therefore the religion of Islam sought to define racism, as well as sought to show the different types of racism that exist, as well as there being a need for us to examine racism and how it was in and around Arabia just before the Holy Prophet preached his message, and those non-Arabs who were at Karbala, the valiant way in which they gave their lives away for the message of Islam. Because as we know, next month in America is what is known as Black History Month. And Black History Month is celebrated in America and indeed in the United Kingdom. In America it's celebrated in February, and the United Kingdom it's celebrated in October. And it is therefore vital for us to be able to write articles in this period where we explain Islam's standpoint regarding such an issue, because you'll find that many of the schools, many of the colleges, many of the universities, and indeed in the workplace, many will discuss the history of the black community, the different biographies of the leaders within those communities. Yet at the same time, you'll find, unfortunately, many Muslims not coming forward with what Islam had to say about racism, and what Islam had to say about the way different communities coexist and interact with each other. Because we know very well that racism, unfortunately, is still prevalent until today. Many thought with the end of apartheid in South Africa and the freeing of Nelson Mandela that that was the last days of racism. That when they saw Mandela being released, many thought that racism would never come back in this way again. That never would you see people having separate washrooms depending on your color. Never would you see again restaurants which divide people in relation to color. Never would you see people on an airline who would not want to sit next to each other because of the color of the person. That's why British Airways notably discusses the idea that they were amongst the first airlines which sought to remove racism because of one action of one of the flight attendants on the airline. The famous story narrates that one of the flight attendants was called over by one of the ladies on the airline This lady was sitting down, and when the flight attendant came to her, she came to her and she said to her, "How can I help you?" The reply was, "You can't see what the problem is?" She said, "So what do you mean?" She said, "You don't see this disgusting colored lady sitting next to me? Remove me from my seat. Take me somewhere else. Do something about this." The story which is narrated is that she went towards the captain, who said to her that the only seats which are available are in first class. And these seats we do not normally give to anyone. But in this situation, you could do whatever you want to do, considering there's one seat left. The narration states that the flight attendant went back towards that lady, and the other lady was sitting right next to her, the colored lady. The flight attendant said, "I'm sorry that we have done what we have done, and that we've put you next to such a disgusting person. Oh, colored lady, come with me, let me take you towards first class." Meaning that she was telling her very clearly, do not think that we accept such actions. She took the colored lady towards the first class in order to show that racism, although it may have been prevalent, was something which is not to be tolerated. That's why John Howard Griffin in 1961 wrote a book when looking at the racism which was prevalent in the southern side of North America. In areas such as Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia, there was a lot of racism which was prevalent. John Howard Griffin wrote a book called Black Like Me, where what he did, he wanted to see the experiences which colored people go through whenever they face different members of the community in that time. What did he do? He made sure there was some ultraviolet which went towards his face. There was a makeup which made the complexion darker. There were other dosages which came towards him. And he then started to walk around saying that I felt like how the colored were feeling. He then began to discuss the prejudices that he saw. He said, for example, when I would be coming out of the bus, if it was a white lady or a white man who was coming out of the bus driver would say, "Mind the gap, sir," or "Mind your step." But if it was me, he wouldn't say anything. When the white man would speak to me, what would he say? He would say to me, "Boy." Whereas when he spoke to a fellow white man, he would say, "Sir." And in this way, he began to realize that racism, unfortunately, was prevalent within America. That's why Muhammad Ali, the famous boxer, himself narrates in his biography that he remembered when his mother had gone through a racist moment, and that moment stayed with him for the rest of his life. He says, "Me and my mother were standing at a bus stop, and when we were looking across the road, there were people walking." He said, "My mother at that moment, she was feeling quite thirsty. She saw there was a cafe which was open. She walked towards the cafe. When she walked towards this cafe, thinking that I'm going to get a cup of water, the cafe door was suddenly closed in front of her, and the sign 'Closed' was written." He said, "When my mother came back, she said to me, 'There may be people in this world who hate you, but you should never hate them.'" And as Martin Luther King used to say, racial prejudice is a dark cloud that surrounds our society. It's a shame when there is racial prejudice. It's a dark cloud that surrounds many a society. And unfortunately, in Europe today, in what one may call refined, modern, intellectual environments, you find, unfortunately, racism is still there and has not been removed. For example, if you were to look on the sporting scene in both Spain and Italy, everybody knows very well how important they see the sport of football there. It is well known that in the last year, there are 2 teams who have been banned. Their supporters have been banned from coming to the stadium. Why? Because whenever there would be any of the black players playing, there would be chants of monkeys. There would be different insults being sent. Songs would be sung in that period. And you ask yourself the question, that when someone says Europe is modern and the Middle East is backward, if racism is modernity, then we have to recheck our scales again. Because when there is still racism against a fellow human being, because of the color of that human being, then everything has to be reassessed again. And that's why, when we come to examine racism theoretically and then within the religion of Islam, the first question we ask is, what are the 5 different types of racism in sociological circles? Because in sociology, they come forward and say, there are 5 different types of racism which affect a human being. And if you take any of these 5, it might have affected you at one point or another in your life. You ask yourself and listen to the 5. The first type of racism which they say has existed in society is pre-reflective gut racism. What does this mean? Pre-reflective gut racism means that racism where you use your emotion above your intellect. In which way? When you are part of a color, and that's the only color you've ever seen, you are not used to mingling with other colors. Every social environment you have, people are of the same color, and therefore you haven't really met up with other communities who are of a different color. Then all of a sudden, imagine someone from another community walks in yours. When they walk in, all of a sudden you're looking at each other and saying, who's he? I said, we've never seen him before. What's he doing here? And you start asking yourself these questions. At the beginning it's wonder, then it's a bit of fear, then it's a bit of aggression. Who does he think coming to our community like this? That type of racism is called pre-reflective gut racism. Why? Because there's no reflection involved in the human being. It's a simple case of emotion overtaking intellect. The human suddenly sees something which is dangerous, something which is different from what they are used to. And that's why the human being has to travel around in order to know that the world is a cosmopolitan world and people are of different colors. A pre-reflective gut racist is someone who's lived in the same four walls the whole of his life. Or has lived in a cocoon and has not left that cocoon, number one. Number two, the second type of racism is what? Post-reflective gut racism. What does this mean? That's the type of racism where no, you are using your intellect above your emotion. But you use your intellect to convince yourself that your race is better than any other race. In this one, post-reflective, you've recognized I am white, he is brown, he is black, they are colored, they are all human beings, but my race is greater than their race. They are a race, and I understand this, but my race is the perfect race. As in when you look at World War II in Germany, in German circles, the Aryan race was which idea? The idea that the purest race is the one with the blonde hair and the blue eyes. That race recognized that there were other races which were existing. But what? But it saw that its race was the pure race. And all other races were seen as being lower. That's number two. Number three is what is known as cultural racism. You recognize you have your culture. And you recognize the others have their culture. So what do? You start convincing yourself that your culture is better than everybody else's. You start saying that yes, they've got their culture, but you know, they're very loud people. And these people are very unclean people. These people are very disorganized people. You start convincing yourself that your culture is above everybody else's culture. And that's why you actually begin even joking about other people's cultures. You find that there are certain races who there are a hatful of jokes and comedy about their race. Why? Because one culture sees itself as being better than everybody else's, and the way they convince themselves that they are better than everybody else is by putting down everybody else. Why? The insecure person, if you ever want to know an arrogant person, know they are insecure. And when they are insecure, all they do is insult. Instead of saying that we are all the same, we are all created of different cultures, you find that they find it hard to accept other cultures. Number three. Number four, institutional racism. What's that? That's the idea that there are certain colors which will never reach the top. Of course, as one famous black comedian said, when they want us to entertain, they all love us. And when they want us to win gold medals, they all love us. But when we want to be the heads of corporations, nobody listens to us at all. In this way, you find that sometimes there is institutional racism. That in certain spectrums of society, you find that there are people who may reach many areas, but never the top. Why? Because institutional racism dictates that you're never good enough to reach that higher level, and that you should remain where you are. As in when you see the President of the United States now being someone who is black, you find the whole world is excited that finally someone of a different color. And if it's taken the human being 21 centuries before they've reached this, then you know that the human being is just about improving. Whereas there are certain countries where you find that there is not a chance that someone of a different color will be president or prime minister. And that racism institutionally is there. The fifth type of racism is which one? Is known as paternalistic racism. What's that? That's when one race believes it is like a father figure to other races. You are good, but listen to me, I'll teach you how to be better. You people have always been backward, but us, we have always been forward. They look at themselves as paternal, and they therefore look down at everybody around them. And that's why you find within Arabia, before our holy prophet came, Arabia had a major problem with anybody whose complexion was not Arab. The Arabs, if somebody's complexion was not Arab or of darker skin, they would come forward and actually put them in the worst positions. They'd put them as their slaves, or they'd put them as their cleaners. Why? They would come forward and say, you are not even worth the soul of the animal. An animal, you are not even worth the soul of the animal. And if we wanted, we'd actually exchange you, like we exchanged the slaves. That's why one of the most famous stories of racism in Arabia, just before our holy prophet came, was the story of Antar. Antar, or Antar as some call him, a famous story of a person who was renowned as one of the greatest poets in Arabia. As you know, on the Kaaba, there are what are known as the Mu'allaqat. The Mu'allaqat are 7 poems which were hung where? Which were hung on the Kaaba. The best 7 poems in Arabia. Their poems would be hung on the Kaaba. People like Labid, people like Tarafa. The third of them was this Antar. But this Antar had a hard time before he was accepted in Arabia. Do you know why? Because his father, Shaddad, because his name was Antar bin Shaddad al-Absi, his father, Shaddad, had married an Ethiopian slave girl. When he had married her, he was actually under the impression that there's no way a black child will come out. Because I'm white, she's black, there's no way a black child can come out. Fickle the human being can be. And so what happens is that when the child emerged, the child was of a colored complexion. And that moment, this Shaddad had to hide himself from the rest of his community. And he, when people came and said, that is your son, he said, he's not my son. Don't bring him anywhere near me. I do not even know of him. It took years for Antar to actually be accepted as the son of Shaddad. Why? Because of 2 reasons. The first reason he was accepted was because of his poetic skill. The second reason why he was accepted was because of his military prowess. Nobody was as strong as him on the battlefield. And you know, in pre-Islamic Arabia, your strength is the be-all and end-all. Without your strength, you will never be able to fight other tribes. This person, when his father came to him, he said, listen, now I accept you as my son as long as you fight for our tribe. See how low the human can be. Just fight for our tribe, I'll accept you as my son. But don't make it too loud that you're my son. You're my son and I accept you. But don't make it too loud. When he wanted to get married, he came to his father. He said to him, Father, I want to get married. He said, to who? He said, to Abla, my cousin. He said, your uncle's daughter? He said, yes. He said, forget about it. He said, why? He said, your uncle, there is nobody as racist as him in Arabia. If you're not of the same village as him, you know some people can get that far. If you're not of the same village as him, he would not give his daughter away to you. Let alone if you have a complexion which is darker than the Arabs. He said, my father, I want to marry my cousin. I have this intention. He said, my son, believe me, it will not happen. He kept on trying to convince his father. Trying and trying and trying until eventually the father said, go to your uncle. You tried. I tell you from now that it may be a rejection to the proposal. When he went to his uncle said, what do you want? He said, I'd like to propose for your daughter. He said, my daughter? You want to propose for her? He said, yes. He said, you want to propose for her? He said, yes, me. He said to him, I'll let you propose to my daughter and marry her as long as you get me 100 pure yellow camels from North Arabia. He said, how many? He said, 100. He said, 100 pure yellow? They have to be the same color? He said, exactly the same color. If you don't bring me all of them exactly the same color, then there is no way that I will help you with the situation. This Antar thought to himself, can a society be so racist because of my color? As in, just because I have a different complexion to everybody else, I have to go through this? He went with all the money that he had gained. He went to Northern Arabia. He started looking for the areas where the people had their camels until he came to An-Nu'man ibn Mundhir. An-Nu'man ibn Mundhir is seen as one of the greatest Arabians. one of the noblemen of Arabia, he came towards him and he said to him that, look, I am willing to buy all of these camels. He said to him, why? He said, because of my complexion, that I am dark, my uncle would not give me his daughter. He said to me, you have to get these 100 pure yellow camels. And nobody is like you when they have that type of camel. He said to him, what it will cost you? He said, whatever it will cost me. As long as it removes racism from our tribes, then let it happen. He managed to get the 100 camels and he eventually married his cousin. But it goes to show you that in and around Arabia, racism was rife. That's why when our Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when our Holy Prophet came within Arabia, he saw this racism was prevalent. He saw many of these people would not accept anyone who had a black complexion or a darker complexion. So he began to reform Arabia's racism. Which ways did he reform the racism? The first step was the revelation of the verse I told you at the beginning of the lecture. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ya ayyuhan nas. Surah 49, verse 13. Ya ayyuhan nas. Inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلًا لِتَعَارَفُوا إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. O mankind, we have created you from male and from female. And we've made you from different races and tribes in order that you get to know one another. Surely the best amongst you in the eyes of Allah is who? Is the one with the taqwa. When Rasulullah revealed this verse, it shattered the myth of racism. Why? Because Rasulullah said, you've been created from different races and tribes. That there isn't just one tribe Allah has created. No. Nor is there just one race. We have created you from different races and from different tribes in order that you get to know one another. This get to know one another, not many people stress on. Why? Because there are many in the Muslim community, they accept. There are white Muslims, black Muslims, colored Muslims, and we accept. But tell them, would you be willing to marry from each other? Because that is getting to know one another. إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ مِنْ ذَكَرٍ وَأُنْثَى وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. So that you get to know one another. Not so that you acknowledge, yes, they have their community, but when a proposal for marriage comes, no way. Not from them. Ziyad ibn Lubayd in the famous story of Juwayber, when Juwayber came to Rasulullah, he said, Ya Rasul, Rasulullah looked at him, he said, Juwayber, why don't you get married? He said, Ya Rasulullah, I am a man who is weak and not someone who is wealthy. Who's going to marry me? Rasulullah said to him, go to Ziyad ibn Lubayd. Ziyad ibn Lubayd was known as one of those Arabs which you don't come near. But he was the head of the Ansar. When Juwayber came to him, Juwayber was a black Ethiopian. He came to him. Ziyad looked at him. He said to him, how can I help you? He said, I've come with a message from Rasulullah. He said, what's your message? He said, I have come to propose for your daughter. He said, you? He said, yes. He said, but you know, you are, and we are. That type of mentality. So at that moment, he said to him, I'm sorry, we the Ansar do not give our daughters to anyone but our own. When Juwayr was about to leave, he said to him, wait. He said to him, you've come with a message from Rasulullah. Principle dictates that in the same way he's come with me, with you to respect, I've got to come back to him with respect. He said, let me go and see Rasulullah. So he went to see Rasulullah. He said, Ya Rasulullah, did you send Juwayr? He said, yes. He said, Ya Rasulullah, you know, we are the Arabs. And he said, what is he? He said, well, you know, he is black, Abyssinian, and he's come to propose for our daughter. Surely we can't accept such a thing. At that moment, he said to him, O Ziyad, haven't we revealed the verse, Ya ayyuhan nas inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha? As in, haven't we said everybody is from Adam and Eve, and Adam and Eve are created from dust? Aren't we all created equal in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What do you mean the person is of a colored complexion? Ziyad at that moment said, Ya Rasulullah, I apologize to you. But I'm going to ask my daughter. If my daughter accepts, then I'm willing to go ahead with it. He went back. He asked his daughter. He said, my daughter, somebody's come to propose. She said, oh my father, we welcome any proposal. Who is it? He said, you know, he's Juwayber. She said, you were a bit hesitant when you said it. Why? He said, he's of a colored complexion, a bit different from what we are. She said, our father, hasn't Rasulullah said taqwa is the main criterion, those who propose for your daughters? Therefore, does he have taqwa? Does he fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Yes, he does. Then I have no problem accepting him as my husband. And because of this Juwaybar married her and he died as a shaheed alongside Rasulullah. He died as a shaheed alongside Rasulullah. It goes to highlight, number one, Rasulullah reformed with this verse. The second verse, Rasulullah used, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافُ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ. Surah 30, verse 22. Amongst his signs is the creations of the heavens and the earth, and the differences in your tongues and in your colors. Many of us here have different languages, don't we? It's a sign of Allah. Likewise, many of us have different colors. The irony is when the white man calls the black man colored. Do you know why? Because when you look at it, the black man should call the white man colored. When he is born, he is pink. And when he is angry, he is blue. And when he is blushing, he is red. When you look at it, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافُ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ. Alwanikum means one of my signs is that you have different complexions. Don't start labeling people, he is black and he is white and he is so on, because of the idea that Allah says this is a sign that all of you have to seek to coexist with each other. Number two, you find, for example, Tawus al-Yamani saying, I was circumambulating the Kaaba and I saw Zayn al-Abidin near the Kaaba crying. He was crying and saying, Ya Allah, forgive me for whatever injustice I have committed. Ya Allah, raise the people on the day of judgment with your mercy, with your justice. He said, when I saw him crying, I suddenly saw him fall on the floor unconscious. I said to him, oh Imam, I woke him up. I said, oh Imam, you are crying to Allah and you are the grandson of Ali ibn Abi Talib. You are the great grandson of Rasulullah. You cry, then what do we do? He said, on the day of judgment, it doesn't matter if you are an Arab master or an Ethiopian slave. Allah will not judge you about who your ancestors are. Allah judges you, the person. Because there are some, they are labeled because of their ancestry. No, judge the person for who they are themselves. That's what he told him. An Ethiopian slave may come on the day of judgment and may get a higher position than an Arab master. Number three, Rasulullah revealed a surah of the Quran named after a black scholar. Who? Luqman. Surah 31 of the Quran is named after Luqman. When you go and read all the books, you will find that Luqman was of a black complexion. Some of the scholars ask the question that why does Luqman speak to his son only in the Quran? Why doesn't he speak to others? Do you know what the reply is? Because nobody was willing to listen to someone who was black in that community. And because of that, he said, if nobody is willing to listen to me because of my color, then I'll teach my son because he's the only one who's going to listen to me. Likewise, in our communities, sometimes if someone is of a different color to us, you find people saying, what's he gonna teach me? He is not of the same color as me. Whereas when Luqman's surah was revealed, can you imagine people like Abu Sufyan, Walid ibn al-Mughira, Utbah ibn Rabi'a, hearing that there's a surah of the Quran revealed about a black scholar, but this black scholar in 7 verses gave more to humanity than those men ever gave. And that's why Rasulullah would compare Luqman with Salman al-Muhammadi. He said, if you want to see true wise men in my community, Salman al-Muhammadi and Luqman the wise. Number 3. Number 4, when Rasulullah and his companions were in danger, how did he remove racism? He said to them, go to a black priest who is Christian. He'll help you in whatever environment you need. And this black priest later on, when he became a Muslim, read the nikah of Rasulullah when he married Abu Sufyan's daughter, Habiba. When Rasulullah married Habiba, who read the nikah? A white? No. A person who was a black Muslim read the nikah of Rasulullah. In the 5th way, which way did Rasulullah remove racism? There were people in the life of Rasulullah and in the religion of Islam who were not Arab, nor were they white complexion. but they gave more to Islam than many before them. Let's look at a couple of examples in the lead up to the 10th of Muharram of black personalities who sacrificed everything they had for Islam. The first of them is Ayman. Ayman was a slave girl. Originally her name was Baraka. She came from Ethiopia. She was originally a servant of Abdullah, the father of Rasulullah. When Abdullah, the father of Rasulullah, died, she brought up Rasulullah. To the extent Rasulullah said, Ayman is my mother. Imagine, an Ethiopian woman brings up Rasulullah. He says, Ayman is like my mother. Ayman gave 2 sons to Islam, who on the day of Hunayn fought alongside Ali ibn Abi Talib in saving this religion. Who were they? Her first husband was Ubaidah ibn Ammar. Ubaidah ibn Ammar and her, when they were married, they gave birth to her son Ayman, hence Ayman. The second son she gave birth to was a son many know. She married Zayd ibn Haritha, and she gave the son Usama ibn Zayd. Usama, the 18-year-old, who certain companions of Rasulullah said, we will not fight under him. He was born from an Ethiopian mother. His mother, Ayman, when she married Zayd, Usama was born. This Ayman was the one who organized the marriage of Amir al-Mu'mineen to Fatima Zahra. She's the one who organized this marriage. And she had also been present in the marriage of Rasulullah to Khadija. When she saw Amir al-Mu'mineen and how he married Fatima Zahra, she began to cry. They said to her, why? She said, I saw Rasulullah and Khadija getting married. It was a marriage of pomp and glory. Yet look at Ali and Fatima. Nothing seems to get to these two from this world. Everything they have, they give away for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She would cry when she'd remember this. This same lady defended Fatima Zahra at the incident of Fadak more than anyone alongside her. Why? Because when Fadak was taken, as you know in law, possession indicates ownership. If I'm in possession of something, it indicates ownership. Do I need to get witnesses or do you need to get witnesses? You need to, because you're making the claim, if I own something, I'm not the one who's meant to get witnesses. But unfortunately, they said to Fatima Zahra, Fadak doesn't belong to you. Prophets do not leave behind inheritance. So what happened? What happened was that Ayman stood up for Fatima Zahra. When she stood up, do you know what she said? The first Khalifa, when he came forward and he said that Fadak doesn't belong to Fatima, he came and he saw Ayman. Ayman came forward. He asked her, who does Fadak belong to? She said, before I answer the question, I want you in front of everyone to say, what did Rasulullah say about me, Ayman? So he replied by saying, Rasulullah said, you, Ayman, are one of those women who is guaranteed Jannah. She said, then let me tell you, when Surah 17 verse 26 of the Quran was revealed, Rasulullah was ordered by Jibreel to give Fadak to Fatima Zahra, salawatullah wa salamu alayha. The first Khalifa, did he stop? No, he admitted, yes, you are right. The second Khalifa came in. He said, what's the situation? He said, Ayman has testified. We asked for witnesses. We have a witness. The second Khalifa said, you take a witness from a non-Arab. You see, the racist undertones, unfortunately, continued. As in, how could you say you take witness from a non-Arab? And so here in this situation, she was bemused by this behavior. That I, who brought up Rasulullah and was with him, you say to me I'm a non-Arab and that's why I can't give witness? She gave everything away to the message of Rasulullah. She gave everything away to the message of Fatima Zahra. That was the first one. The second black woman who gave everything away to the message of Rasulullah was Fidda. Fidda, who many a community call Bibi Fidda. Originally many come forward and say she was a princess. She came and she served the house of Fatima Zahra. It's narrated in one hadith that one day Fatima Zahra would come forward and serve, and another day Fidda would come forward and serve. They'd alternate between them. This Fadda, Amir al-Mu'mineen, her first husband, he found him for her. His name was Abu Tha'lab al-Habashi. Then the second husband she married was Malik. This Malik once came to the second Khalifa. When he came to him, he came to complain about Fadda. Do you know what the second Khalifa said to him? He said, a hair, listen to the words, a hair from the servants of the family of Abu Talib is greater than the whole of my tribe, Adi. Don't come and complain about the servants of Al Muhammad. This is a lady who the Quran revealed the verse about. Which verse? يطعمون الطعام على حبه مسكينا ويتيما وأسيرا. Surah 76 verse 8 of the Quran was revealed in the house of Fatima and Amir al-Mu'mineen when they fasted for 3 days. Every time they would want to break the fast, someone would knock at the door. Either it be an orphan or a captive or a prisoner. Every time Fadda would be alongside them, answering the door for them. Yet this Fadda is an example for every female who is listening to this lecture today. Why? Because the last 20 years of her life, she didn't answer a question except by using the Holy Quran. Today, you have to plead to read the Quran. Today, the issues are petty issues at home. Today, youths look for women who do not wear hijab. Today, fathers tell their daughters, don't wear hijab. Today isn't the day where Fidda's honor is understood. The moment people understand that this original Abyssinian girl comes forward for the last 20 years of her life, does not answer except by the Quran. And when I say except by the Quran, there is a conversation that's actually happened which proves this. A man says, one day I was lost from my caravan. I saw this woman stranded in the middle of the desert. I came near her and I said to her, excuse me, where are you going? She replied, Surah 43, verse 89, قُلْ سَلَامٌ فَسَوْفَ يَعْلَمُونَ. Say salamu alaykum before you speak. Then at that moment he looked at her, he said, I'm sorry. Salamu alaykum. Are you lost? She came forward and said, وَمَنْ يَهْدِ اللَّهِ فَمَا لَهُ مِن مُضِلٍ. Whoever Allah guides, nobody can misguide. Surah 39, verse 37. He said to her, are you a human or a jinn? Answering like this. She replied by saying, Surah 7, verse 31, Ya Bani Adam, خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ عِنْدَ كُلِّ masjid. Then he said to her at that moment, where have you come from? Surah 41, verse 44. أُولَٰئِكَ يُنَادُونَ مِن مَكَانٍ بَعِيدٍ. I have come from somewhere far away. At that moment he said to her, where are you going? Surah 3, verse 97. وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. Allah has ordained for people to go towards Hajj. Surah 3, verse 97. How many days have you been lost? خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ فِي سِتَّةِ أَيَّامٍ. 6 days. Surah 50, verse number 38. The next moment, what did he say to her? Are you hungry? Surah 21, verse number 8. وَمَا جَعَلْنَاهُمْ جَسَدًا لَا يَأْكُلُونَ الطَّعَامِ. We have not created them as humans who do not eat food. Yes, I'm hungry. I've been lost for this period. He then said to her at that moment, what did he say to her? Imagine what he's going through. He then said to her at this moment, he said to her, then you have to run quickly. She said, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Surah 2, verse 286. Allah does not put on a burden which you cannot handle. I cannot run. He was on his camel. He came forward and he said to her, then come and sit behind me on the camel. She came forward and she said, لو كان فيهم آلهة إلا الله لفسدتا. If there was gods besides Allah, then there would be fasad on the earth. If I sit behind you on a camel and you're not mahram to me, there'll be fasad. Surah 21, verse number 22. He said to her, then I'll get down from the camel, you sit here. Subhana alladhi sakhara lana hadha wa ma kunna lahu muqrinin. Which verse? Surah 43, verse number 13. They continued traveling. All of a sudden, she looked forward. When she looked forward, she saw 2 people who were moving. He said, do you know them? She called out, Ya Yahya, khudh al-kitab biquwwa. Ya Musa, inni ana Allah, Rabb al-Alameen. He said to her, do you know them? She said, Al-mal wal-banun, zinat al-hayat al-dunya. Surah 18, verse 46. Our wealth and our children are what? Our wealth and our children are the zina of this world. When the children Yahya and Musa came to her, she said, "Mother, how shall we reward him?" She said, Surah 28, verse number 26, "Ya abati istajir, inna khayra man istajarta al-qawiyyu al-amin." Oh, my father, honor them, because he who you have honored is trustworthy and he has been strong. Until Surah 2, verse number 261, when she said, "No, give them more." Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yudha'if liman yasha'. In this way, Fidda answers everything by Quran, to the extent the man looked at Yahya and Musa, her sons. He said to them, "What is this your mother's been doing?" She replied by saying, "My mother, having lived with Fatima, meant that the last 20 years of her life, she only answers back using the Holy Quran." Imagine. The third of the black community who gave his life away for the religion of Islam was the scholar of Africa, Shawzab. Some call him in the community Shawzab. This person was a scholar, but from Africa. He gave his life away next to Abu Abdullah. He came forward and he said, "This is my life and it's dedicated to Abu Abdullah and to this family." The fourth of the black community who came forward and gave his life away on the 10th of Muharram was John, the Abyssinian slave. This John originally was whom? Originally this John was the slave of Al-Fadl. Amir al-Mu'mineen bought him for 150 gold coins. He then gave him to Abu Dharr al-Ghafari. He served Abu Dharr al-Ghafari night and day until Abu Dharr al-Ghafari was exiled to the Rabada. When he was exiled there, he then served Imam al-Hasan. Then he served Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. When he came forward on the 10th of Muharram, Abu Abdullah said to him, "Oh John, you do not have to come and fight on my behalf. You have served Al-Muhammad enough." He said, "Ya Abu Abdullah, my blood may not be like your blood, and my complexion may not be like your complexion. But when I die on the plains of Karbala, and my blood mixes with your blood, then I will be the purest person lying on that ground." Abu Abdullah looked at him. Then John looked back. What did he say to him? John looked back and he said to him, "Ya Abu Abdullah, how could you tell me to leave? What will I answer Allah on the day of judgment? And how will I show my face to Fatima al-Zahra? When she asks me, 'Did you protect my son on the 10th of Muharram?' كيف ترى الفجار ضرب الأسود بالمشرف القاطع المهندي أذب عنكم باللسان واليد أرجو به الجنة يوم المورد." He came forward with these beautiful words. He said, how do these people, these oppressors, see the black man walking towards them? كيف ترى الفجار ضرب الأسود بالمشرف القاطع المهندي. I'll come forward and I strike them. A number of strikes. I'll defend Abu Abdullah with my tongue, and I'll defend him with my sword. All I look for in return is the heaven that he has promised. He went out, he fought valiantly, until eventually at the end, he was killed. But Abu Abdullah's army wasn't just made up of people from the African community. He had people from the Turkish community as well. He had somebody who only a couple of weeks earlier had been from the Christian community. Somebody by the name of Wahab al-Kalbi. Wahab al-Kalbi, there are a number of different narrations about Wahab. Amongst the narrations that come forward was that he had just been married for about 17 days. Wahab had been married for a 17-day period. Abu Abdullah was now passing his area. Amongst the narrations which come forward state that when his mother inquired, "Who is it that is passing by our house?" Wahab said, "Abu Abdullah." His mother said, "What is it that Abu Abdullah wants?" He said to her mother, "Do you know him?" One of the narrations states that his mother says to him, "How do I not know him? When I was pregnant with you, I went through an illness. Your father went to his father, Amir al-Mu'mineen. He went to him, and although we weren't of the same religion, he knew his father was a pious human being. He went towards him and he said, 'Oh Ali, although I am a Christian, I ask you to pray to your Lord. My wife is pregnant with the child, but she's going through an illness.'" He says that Ali ibn Abi Talib prayed to the Lord, and the Lord answered his prayer. And this moment she said to him, Wahab, go to Aba Abdullah and speak to him. When he went towards Aba Abdullah, Wahab came near him. When he came near him, he said to him, Ya Aba Abdullah, what is happening? He said, Wahab, we are going out to fight the opposition. We are going out to try and defend ourselves from this oppression which has come towards us. He said to him, Ya Aba Abdullah, allow me to join with you on this army. He said to him, Wahab, do not worry about joining me in this army. You can remain behind with your family. His wife had just got married to him. It had only been 17 days since they had been married. He turned around to his wife. He said, I am going towards the religion of Abu Abdullah. She said to him, why? He said, because I am convinced that that is the right way. She said, then take me with you. She went and she joined him, and his mother joined him as well. They came out. He then said to his wife that I'm going to go out and I'm going to defend Abu Abdullah. His wife said, no, stay behind, don't go out. He said, no, I have to defend him. She went towards Abu Abdullah. When she went towards him, she came to him. She said, Ya Aba Abdullah, I ask you for one request. He said to her, what is it? She said, Ya Aba Abdullah, do you promise me that me and my husband will go to paradise with each other? Abu Abdullah replied back to her, he said, I promise you, you will enter paradise with each other. She said, Ya Abu Abdullah, that's all I need to know. Yet still she would tell Wahab, Wahab, don't fight, stay back, don't go forward. Wahab would go forward on the battlefield. He killed a number of the oppositions. He returned back to his mother. He said to her mother, are you proud of me the way I am fighting? And the mother said, I am proud, but I would be more proud if you gave your life away for the son of Fatima Zahra. When he heard that, he went out on the battlefield. His wife pleaded with him. She said, don't go. He was about to leave. She said, don't go. As he was walking, she turned around all of a sudden and she said, Wahab, go out and fight amongst the soldiers. He turned around to her and he said to her, why? She said, because the cries of the children of Abu Abdullah are killing me. Wahab, go out and defend Abu Abdullah. When he went out to defend Abu Abdullah, they surrounded him from every angle, until they came and struck his holy head. His head was on the ground. Ammar ibn Sa'ad threw his head back to his mother. Do you know what his mother did? Listen to the bravery of this mother. She took the head, she gave it back. She said, that which I gave to Fatima, I do not want back. His wife went running towards her husband's body. She was sitting there. All of a sudden, Shimr bin al-Jawshan said to his slave, Rustam, he said, Rustam, go and kill the lady. This young bride was sitting there, her husband. Rustam came and struck her on her head. And that's why when Abu Abdullah said to her, you'll be in paradise, the promise was true. And they both died next to each other. What happened was, when John died, his head was on the ground. Wahab, when he died, his head was on the ground. They placed both these heads on a spear, and they carried these spears forward. But there was one head, whenever they placed it on a spear, it would come down on the ground. The head of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. One narration says that when the head fell on the ground, they called Imam Zain al-Abidin to come and pick up his father's head. When Imam Zain al-Abidin approached his father's head, he came near his father. He began to talk with the head. The head then replied by saying, Zain al-Abidin, go and look for Sukaina before you leave this land. You know where I am going now. I am taking you towards it. He looked around. He looked for Sayyidah Zainab. When he found her, he said, where is Sukaina? And they looked around one way and the other. They couldn't find her until they found Sukaina sitting near a horse. And there was a lady covered all in black sitting next to her. Sayyidah Zainab walked towards this lady. When she came near her, she said to her, oh lady, I thank you for looking after my niece. Oh lady, would you tell me what your name is, so that when I return to Medina, I ask my mother Fatima to pray for you. The lady then replied, what did she say? She said, Zainab, do you not recognize your mother in front of you? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Raise your hands, brothers and sisters, as high as you can. This night where we honor all the different members of our communities around the Islamic world. Ya Allah, remove the racism within our communities and around every community in the Islamic and non-Muslim world. Ya Allah, allow us to live in peace and coexistence with each other. Raise us with the Imam of your time. Allow us to be amongst his companions. Allow our daughters to memorize the Quran in the way Bibi Fadda memorized the Quran. Ya Allah, allow us to follow the message of the companions of Aba Abdullah. Raise us with the Imam as his companions. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all those around the Islamic world, especially those who are going through turbulent times within the Middle East. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect them and protect the whole of the Islamic world. Raise your hands for our brother from the Manji family, Shirali Manji, who is not feeling well at all, has been taken to hospital. For all of those who have requested me to recite Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, raise your hands. أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ. Louder. أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. Ya Allah, give him health in the name of the one ill at Karbala, Imam Zainul Abidin. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the Surah Al-Fatiha, but before it the loudest of salawat.